Okay, this is the introduction. I say, hello everybody. Welcome to Prehistory, a Traveler's Guide for History Talks. I am your host, Greg Nuneman. With me today are the co-host Christopher Grall, Samuel Iler, Scott Mardis, and for the next couple of set of hours, we have our second esteemed guest, Mr. Dinosaur George Blasing.
How are you, everybody?
Fabulous, good sir.
Good. Very good.
Okay, who wants to field this following question here? I'll field this first question. It's about Nanotyrannus. Do you believe Nanotyrannus to be its own species / genus, or just to be a juvenile Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Well, I'll go. I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Lawrence Whitmer, where they CAT scanned the brain, and what they found was that the brain shape and position within the skull of Nanotyrannus is distinctively different from Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so based off of that, if Nanotyrannus is an animal that morphs into something different, it would also suggest that the brain not only changes shape, but changes the position within the skull. And I just, that to me is not something I can imagine occurring. I just can't imagine. I mean, certainly there are animals within the animal kingdom where there's dramatic change, but that's almost always fish when they're maturing, or it's insects. But other than that, I cannot think of any animals that have that dramatic of a change. So I don't know why dinosaurs would have had it, or at least one dinosaur would have had it. I believe it's its own species.
Now, on that, though, I saw some research from Dr. Holly Woodward on histological research that revealed a whole line of evidence that points it to actually being a juvenile Tyrannosaurus. And I can post you photos of her research from DinoFest after the interview's over with. That's what convinced me of Nanotyrannus being a juvenile T-Rex, based on her research in bone histology. Well, I'm taking samples from specimens nicknamed Jane and Little Pete. Some very great research. I'll send you the research on that after we're done with that.
Cool. Yeah, I saw the information about Baby Bob, which, based on what I saw, and what I saw is limited, but it is smaller than Jane, but is completely Tyrannosaurus Rex in every manner. The tooth count, the tooth shape, the skull design. And so if that is an accurate portrayal of Baby Bob, then it would suggest that Tyrannosaurus not only morphs from Nanotyrannus to Tyrannosaurus, but it goes from Tyrannosaurus to Nanotyrannus and then back to Tyrannosaurus Rex. If, in fact, Baby Bob is accurate, once science has an access to it, it may change some of the things we have. I know that, I had the chance to look at the teeth of Tinker. Now, what age Tinker was compared to Jane, I don't know. But size-wise, they look to be very similar, and yet the teeth are absolutely tyrannosaurid. They're round, very robust, have the clear, distinctive curvature of the serrations on the teeth. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what new evidence emerges. It's an interesting debate, that's for sure.
Okay, thanks for answering that one. Here's the next question I'll have you ask, Chris. The question is, do you feel that the Dromaeosaurs, aka raptors in Jurassic Club, could have been depicted better?
Well, I think, in my opinion, how the raptors look, I thought they were probably maybe a little. They showed some feathers and interpretations, but I thought they were probably not quite as accurate. But even though it could be just because for entertainment purposes, how people would view a dinosaur, probably still have scales, less feathers, would not actually look like a bird that much. But I would actually say that if there was a time where, if maybe a network actually would say, okay, we're going to put the facts straight into a documentary show, I would actually say just put on the facts, show the evidence, let us actually see dromaeosaurs with feathers. Because we find evidence that Velociraptor had feathers, because barb impressions on the humerus. I mean, I would say that that's the best evidence to actually show that that Dromaeosaurus did actually have feathers. And I mean, like Microraptor is also one that we can actually look up to, and Sinornithosaurus. I mean, all those types of dinosaurs. And I would actually go with that route. I mean, yeah, the raptors in Jurassic Fight Club, I thought they were actually anatomically wise, actually pretty good. I would actually say that maybe in terms of like appearance, I would actually say anatomically great, but visually probably just a little bit under par. But even though I enjoyed the show, so I think it was actually pretty good. So that's my opinion.
It's all financial is why. Just to let you know, it's financial. The cost back in 2006 to animate feathers was dramatic because of the motion and movement involved. I suspect now they've advanced things, but back then you literally had an animator whose job it was just to move feathers on the animal. Otherwise, they look very blocky. And so I will tell you that there was a lot of conversation about needing more feathers, but it was one of finances that made the decision not to feather them completely because of how the feathers would have looked and the cost to make them flow with the body as the animals moved. And so I absolutely agree with you, Christopher, that I wish they could have been better. I wish we would have adjusted the arm posture better. But once things began, and animation began, I think, late 2005, 2006, obviously. There are so many financial things that we had to take into consideration that it is unfortunate, but feathers cost too much money in 2006, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete
sense. Yes, it does make sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sam, I'll let you ask this one.
Hang on a second. Sorry.
It's in the chat.
In your personal opinion, do you believe that during the time period that Tyrannosaurus Rex lived in North America, that there might be theropods or other predators potentially more dangerous than Tyrannosaurus?
Wow. It depends on, I guess, what we mean by dangerous, because taking out size, dromaeosaurs would have been more dangerous to something like you and I because of the ability, I think, first you have the ability to hide where you are. I mean, where do you hide a 7-ton Tyrannosaurus? So from the aspect of brain strength and weaponry and agility, I would say that they would be more dangerous, Sam, than a Tyrannosaurus Rex to something of our size. But to bigger animals, boy, I don't know if something will ever be found that would have been worse than them. They're just an absolute terrifying animal. So that's a tough one, man. Dromaeosaurs are hard to beat, but I wouldn't want to run up against a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Okay, that settles that one. I have this question from my friend Australia, Stephen Stark. Who do you prefer teaching, children or adults? And furthermore, who is more receptive?
The kids are always more receptive. I focus most of my attention teaching kids. And the reason for that is with kids, I'm able to teach at a more simplistic level, not beneath them, not Barney. But when you teach a child, you can engage them more because they don't have that predetermined idea that it's not an argument. Teaching adults, some can become more of an argument, one side versus the other, which is great, and I enjoy that immensely. But then that's no longer teaching. That becomes debating. So I enjoy teaching kids better because It's more of an educational opportunity to make them think of things in a different perspective. Whereas with most adults, if you're teaching adults that know about dinosaurs, then it becomes more of a little bit of sharing of information, but more of defending one's own opinion. So it's more enjoyable teaching kids.
Well, thank you for your response. All right, looking for the next one here. This is one of my questions. What are your thoughts on Dr. Mark McManaman's Triassic Kraken hypothesis?
Ooh, I'm unfamiliar with it.
Scott can fill you in more about this. Basically, the hypothesis is that there's this large collection of giant ichthyosaurs called Shaunosaurs or Shastosaurs out in, I think, Nebraska or something.
Right.
They were found all dead in a certain area in a certain pose, and it led some to speculate that some sort of giant cephalopod type creature may have, killed them or something, dragged their bodies down to the bottom or whatnot. Storm, what your thoughts were on such a giant cephalopod existing during the Mesozoic era?
Well, if it's a deep sea cephalopod, or it spent most of its time in the deep sea, then we don't have access to layers that really represent the deepest part of the ocean. What we have in the fossil record are layers that represented a more shallow area that have now been exposed, that we can access. So there are untold amounts of fossilized animals that were more deep sea whose fossils probably still remain a mile under the ocean. So it's not fair to dismiss the idea because we don't see any evidence to support it. I think the question becomes, if that was a deep sea animal, would we get a chance to even see any evidence of its existence? So I believe there's certainly things that haven't been discovered. When it comes to the big Shaunosaurs, those big giant ichthyosaurs, I would think that if an animal were to kill something like that, then there would be clear signs of predation. Because if you had the ability to kill something as big as those animals, then you have weaponry that clearly would have left marks on the bone, unless it had some sort of harpoon that paralyzed the animal but didn't leave a lot of evidence of predation on them. I think when you see an animal that kills another animal, there's such a disarticulation of the body. It's being ripped, it's being shook, it's being grabbed and shaken back and forth. And so those Shaunosaurs, the one that I saw, was just laying out like he just laid down and died. And I don't think that's a result of being attacked. I think he would have been more disarticulated. But it is interesting to think. I mean, remember, there were times where we laughed about the idea of giant squid existing. And there's no more debate about that. So certainly there could have been big things. I'm not familiar with all the ins and outs of it, but just based on your description, that would be my best guess.
And just a little correction, this was at Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in Nevada.
Ah, right.
All right, that's out of the way. I'm going to send this next question here to Sam here about... pop this next question up, and I'll have him ask you this one. All right, this one's on you.
What are your views on awesome bro culture?
On what? Say that again, Sam.
Awesome bro culture.
I can appreciate that artists and people that produce television shows have a tendency to glamorize or promote excitement, to promote aggressiveness. A tyrannosaur with its mouth wide open screaming in your face is more exciting than one that chirps like a bird. So I think that we have to be a little careful, me included. We have to be a little careful of this idea that everything is screaming and stomping and roaring, because if we look at modern animals, that's not always the case. A lion doesn't hide and then scream at the top of his lungs before he attacks a zebra. He doesn't make any noise at all until he's killed the zebra, because the last thing he wants to do is give away his position. So I would guess, Sam, that we should probably rein back a little bit on our exploitation, especially of the carnivores, of these dramatic, striking poses of, the next thing, the only thing I think is missing would be one holding a knife or a machine gun next. That'd be the next step to where we're going. But I will defend, when I defend artists, let me say this about the artists. If they just focus on a mundane, casual stance, does the majority of the public find that interesting? And the job of an artist is to express him or herself and to share their work with others. But if your work's going to be viewed, it needs to be aesthetically attractive to the viewer. And I think that we will never see an end to the dramatic and the excitement. But I do think it's a good thing to call it out and at least bring attention to maybe we're going too far overboard with it.
Well, I personally look at awesome bro culture as kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, in some ways, yes, it's beneficial because it rekindles people's interest in dinosaurs. But on the other hand, it can be a negative thing because it sometimes portrays dinosaurs as being more like monsters rather than animals.
Yeah, that's very well put. That's a great statement, Sam, that dinosaurs weren't monsters, they were animals. Ooh, we need to make a t-shirt. I'll send you a kickback, Sam. I'm going to steal that from you.
Go ahead.
Look for the check. It's in the mail. Yeah.
I'll keep my eyes peeled.
Okay, if we're ready to go on to the next question, I have another one from my friend Stephen in Australia. It is, what is the worst injury you've seen in any prehistoric animal that you have either seen in person or in photographs?
Wow. Well, I saw a jaw of a hadrosaur, and I can't remember where we were when we saw it. I don't know if it was in the museum in Norman, Oklahoma, but there was a jaw that had a real nasty infection, and just the look of it made me think that thing, it must have been unbelievably horrible. But the most damages I've ever seen have been from Allosaurus. I've seen broken and fused backbones, broken and fused tails, infected toe bones. I have replicas of those pieces myself, and those look so nasty. The one that bothers me the most would be the broken and fused backbones. Either dinosaurs had an unbelievable tolerance for pain, or I can't imagine walking around with a broken back where your two vertebrae are actually grinding into each other to where they ultimately become fused. Those have been the worst. And obviously Sue has, big ones and that kind of stuff, and that's pretty devastating, that broken leg. But I would say of all of them, it would be the backbone of an Allosaurus is the worst I've ever seen, and the one that bothers me now just thinking about it.
Yeah, because I would actually have to mention the Gorgosaurus that is actually in the Indianapolis Children's Museum that has that compound fracture in I can't remember which side of the legs, but it's been recorded to be one of the worst compound fractures in the fossil record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a direwolf at the Indiana State Museum that had fallen into a cave and broken its legs.
Man.
Felt bad for the poor thing.
And worse than that would be to starve to death after that. Just the slow starving to death is hard to get your mind around.
Okay, thanks for that answering that. I'm trying to think, what's the next question I'm going to pick off the roster here? Okay, here's a simple one. What are your thoughts on Indominus Rex from Jurassic World?
Loved it. Loved the movie. I have no trouble separating myself from a fan of movies and a criticizer of paleontology. I have no problem doing that. When I went to go see the movie, I didn't go in wanting to look for errors and mistakes and that kind of stuff. I understand the need for scientific accuracy, but that just wasn't me. I went to go see the movie for fun. I loved Indominus Rex. I only wish, if there would have been one change, I wish they would have given him more of a baryonyx kind of skull. Not baryonyx, maybe that's not fair. More of a velociraptorid skull instead of the big tyrannosaur skull. I wish they would have slimmed it a little bit so that when you came to the realization that it had raptor in it, then you would have went, that's why that skull is such an odd shape. You know, it should have been between Spinosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, not as elongated, but more elongated and narrow. That's the only thing I would have liked to have seen change. But man, I loved it. I didn't like the fact that it was out killing for fun, that kind of thing, because getting back to Sam's earlier point, that's a monster. I liked the idea that it was capable of killing pretty much anything because it had all the attributes of all the bad guys. But I liked Indominus. It was really cool. I thought he was neat. I wish they would have given him a different color palette, because I think the darker colors make him look a little more sinister. But maybe I'm thinking Darth Vader. Maybe that's going too far to the sci-fi side.
All right, got that out of the way. Thank you once again. I also got yet another one from Stephen in Australia. Another one here. If you could spend the rest of your life studying just one specimen, what would it be?
Wow. Holy smokes. Utahraptor. I think it would be Utahraptor, because that dinosaur changed the game as far as I'm concerned about how animals had to adapt and evolve to predators. You know, throughout the history of life, there's a never-ending battle between herbivores and carnivores, and herbivores are always trying to stay one step ahead of the advancements of the carnivores. But when you look at Utahraptor, and based on my limited opportunity to see real bones, based on what I know of Utahraptor, he seemed to be so advanced. I think that dinosaur may have spurred on more of the ankylosaurs later on, because they had to come up with weaponry and a defensive mechanism that would have stopped something smaller. You know, big dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus and those guys, you know, they certainly were monsters, but I think full body armor came about because of dromaeosaurs or dinosaurs like that. And so I would love to have, if I had one dinosaur to study my whole life, now it would be Utahraptor, just to see if I could figure out how it impacted its environment. I think it would have been very detrimental, whereas I think other predators are a positive impact on the environment because of the role they play, killing the sick, the weak, and the old and the young. That's really that's the function of a carnivore. You keep the herd healthy. You get rid of the sick, you pick off the old because they can't defend themselves, and you pick off the young because they don't defend themselves. But what I see with Utahraptor is that dinosaur wasn't relegated to the three important roles that a carnivore plays. I think they had the ability to take on the healthiest of the herd, and that's why it's detrimental. If the leader of the group is the one that knows where the water is and where the food sources are, and where the migration trails lead, and they're picked off, then potentially you have killed more than one dinosaur in the herd. You might wipe out the herd from those kind of actions. And that's why I think Utahraptors may have been too good for their own good. And that's what I'd like to study. I'd like to know if that's indeed the case, if any of those guesses are right.
Well, that's very, very interesting response there, George. Thank you. There's up to the next question. Are there any paleontologists that you looked up to when you were a child and whom inspired you to take up your career in paleontology? It's all the big guys, the original paleontologists. When I was a kid, the books that I read talking about Cope and Marsh and those guys, obviously those, but to me as a kid, they were so far separated from me. I didn't think of them as sort of heroes, because I only read about them. You remember, in my day and age, we had 3 TV stations, and we had the library. And that's the only place you got information, and, of course, a museum. But when I got older and I started, I would say once I got into high school, and I started hearing about Robert Bacher and people like Phil Curry, well, they sort of became my first heroes.
because I could relate to them, because I could see them. And as I started watching more shows, I look up to Dr. Larry Whitmer, Lawrence G. Whitmer. I look up to him, or Lawrence Whitmer. I look up to him tremendously. Tom Holtz, I am so enamored with his ability to communicate to the general public, and I'm so impressed with his knowledge. Phil Curry, Dr. Bacher, all the names that most people would know of, but those, Bacher and Curry, became my real heroes because they were the first guys I could see actually working on TV, and I could read and kind of they were alive. The guys that encouraged me when I was younger, they were all dead. And so these were the first people I could really relate to. So they became my heroes. And I'm happy to say I've met and had dinner with all of them. And I know them on a personal level. And thank the heavens above, they were as nice as I hoped they were. Because the worst thing about meeting your hero is if they don't turn out to be the people you think they are, it destroys every thought you had. In my particular case, Dr. Whitmer, Dr. Holtz, Dr. Curry, and Dr. Bacher are all some of the nicest people I've ever met. So they remain my heroes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I expected to hear, George. And here's a follow-up to that kind of relates to it. So what inspired you to get into the field, and in particular the idea of the traveling museum and doing the Q&A that you do for the public with your Ask DG segment and all that?
I never stopped my love of dinosaurs, but I got into retail like a couple of you guys are involved in retail. I got into retail and my career took off. And as I got older, I came from a family, we didn't have a lot of money. And so I started making a lot of money. And so I put off the idea of making paleontology a career because of the financial gains I was making in retail. And my career expanded. I was being promoted and I was a regional director of ops. And then I became a regional vice president for another big retail company. But around that, I never stopped loving paleontology and studying. I bought every textbook, every book I could get. I had this gigantic library. And what happened was one Sunday, I come up and somebody's knocking on my front door, and I open the door, and it's a lady and her husband. And their card broke down, and they asked me if I could give them a jump start. So when I opened my door to talk to her, the lady looked in my house and saw it was filled with dinosaur bones. And she couldn't believe it. And it turns out she was a science teacher from a kind of a low-income school here in San Antonio. And she said, man, is there any way you could take a couple of these bones and show them to my students? And I thought, I'll take a day off from work and I'll go. So I did, and I loved it. And I showed these kids things they had never seen in their life. And about 3 days later, I get a letter from the mother of one of the kids. And the lady says, my oldest son was in prison. My middle son was shot and killed when he was involved in a armed robbery. And she said, all I have left in my family is my son. And this kid was only 6 years old, 6 years old. And he had told his mother on a number of occasions he was going to do the same thing his brothers did, get in gangs and that kind of stuff and drop out of school. But the day I went to that school, he came home and told his mom he wanted to go to the library because he wanted to get books on dinosaurs because now he wanted to be a dinosaur man. That letter changed my entire opinion of life at that moment because I gave 45 minutes of my time. And in that time, I had an impact on one child who may have been making a bad decision in his life. But he decided science was his. So that's when I said, I'm going to quit my career in retail, and I'm going to figure out a way to make dinosaurs my focus. So I came up with the idea of a retail store, and that lasted for 4 or 5 years, I think. And then I closed it, and I started speaking full-time. And once I started speaking full-time, I started learning that more and more kids out there never get a chance to go to museums. So that's when I took it to the next level, which was I'll take all the things I have in my collection and I'll create this traveling museum. And that's what we do now. And I just came back off the road for being on the road for 8 weeks of traveling. We go from school to school, and I absolutely love it. But that's kind of how I got to do what I do now.
Very inspirational, George. Okay, time for a simpler question here. Regarding movies. What was the first dinosaur movie that you ever saw?
The one that I can remember was Valley of the Gwangi. When I saw and I saw it at a theater, I stood up when that little, was it Myohippus or Mesohippus? What was the little horse?
Eohippus, I think.
Eohippus. When that little horse came out, I stood up and I said, "Oh my God, that's a miniature horse." And it was real to me. I mean, look, man, that thing was real. It was real, baby. And so then as the movie progressed, you've got cowboys, you've got dinosaurs. The only way my life could have been better on that day is if an alien spaceship had landed in the street when I was leaving the theater. That is the movie that solidified my love of dinosaurs. Valley of the Gwangi to this day. You know, when I saw the first Jurassic Park, I was amazed. But I was amazed as an adult. There's a difference between being amazed as an adult and being amazed as a kid, because amazed as a kid, that's burned in your mind for eternity. So, Valley of the Gwangi, loved it, still love it.
That's a testament to Ray Harryhausen as a special effects animator. I don't think anyone did dinosaurs in stop motion better than either he or Jim Danforth, or even his mentor, Willis O'Brien, in the original King Kong in 1930.
Yeah, those animals were alive. And I bet you guys will agree, those animals were alive in your mind.
If I had to name my favorite film of his, it would probably be 1 Million Years BC. I mean, sure, it's got cavemen and dinosaurs, but I didn't care. I still love the film.
Totally agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I would actually say my favorite stop motion dinosaur film would actually be the 1925 version of The Lost World.
Right.
I just couldn't believe that how these animators just made these animals look alive, and I was just in awe of it. And when I first saw it, I was just like, this is amazing. And I credit to Willis O'Brien, Ray Harryhausen, to making these animals look so spectacular.
Yeah.
And you got anything you'd like to say on this matter, Scott? He's been conspicuously absent. As for my personal favorites, it would be probably a toss-up with Valley of Gwangi and Planet of Dinosaurs for my two favorite stop-motion dinosaur films. Yeah. Okay. All right. On to the next one. I don't know if you go out and excavate bones or not, but this question was if you did that kind of thing, where's the one place you would want to go to excavate dinosaur bones?
You know, I used to, for years, that's what I did every summer. Every summer, June, July, and August, I would spend 3 months in the field. If I had the time, I'd try. And that's what I did for the longest time. Excuse me, the Hell Creek Formation would be where I want to go. I like the Hell Creek. I like the dinosaurs from the Hell Creek. Judith River, I would enjoy doing that as well. But the reason why I like the Hell Creek is that the sediment is easier to dig through, and the matrix is easier in most cases to get off the bone. So to be able to see it, I like that better. You go into some of the Jurassic stuff, and man, take you 2 years to get through the matrix just to clean the bone. So Hell Creek is where I'd like to spend my time, I think.
That's where I'd definitely like to go too if I had it in me to go digging for bones, just to see if I can find another T-Rex.
Yeah.
Because if you find a new T-Rex, you get in the front page of the news.
Yeah. Hello. That's right.
You're finally with us, Scott.
Oh, so you can hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Several times and I didn't think you guys could hear me.
Okay. Okay, I'll let you ask this question here, Scott, as soon as I post it here in the chat box. I'll let you ask this one to get you started before you start a marine reptile discussion. Right. The question is, do you think Paleosaurs could have reached the giant size that they were given in Walking with Dinosaurs if they had not gone extinct and the right conditions were favorable for them to reach even larger size than they did during the Mesozoic era? Frank and Steve Alton Meg series.
I think the only thing that limited their size was the availability of bigger prey within their environment. To grow big requires a big food source. And that's why I think Megalodon grew to such large size, because there were whales. There was enough of a big variety of big things to eat. So I don't know if pliosaurs, I mean, certainly there was big animals that they could have eaten, but not as many of the big. I think the fish were the biggest thing, and other than that, there was some of the smaller marine reptiles, but I think the smaller ones were so much more agile, the ability to change directions quicker. Pliosaur to me almost looks like a oil tanker where it takes him 2 miles just to make a U-turn, because his body is not as fluid, I don't think, as say that of an ichthyosaur, of a plesiosaur. I could be wrong. I don't know enough about them, but certainly had there been a big enough ready food source, and size would have been beneficial to catch that food source, I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't be as big or even bigger than what they've shown in various movies, because water, the beauty of water is you don't have the limitations of size that you have on land. So they could reach whatever portions was necessary to be what they needed to be. So had there been a food source big enough and ready enough, then I think, yeah, they would have grown even bigger than what was portrayed in any of those shows.
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, Scott, if you want to answer some of your own questions, go right on ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me good?
Yeah, I can hear you, Scott.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, one thing I want to touch on, I'm sure you have come in contact with hostile young Earth creationists when you have gone out to give some of your speeches. And do you think that maybe perhaps academic snobbery plus promotion of radical atheism may be driving people away from paleontology and into the creationist camps? In other words, do you think some of the problems with this whole controversy actually emanate from the academics themselves?
I think it can. I think when people do not have any respect whatsoever for somebody else's opinion, that to me is no longer science. That's politics. I don't ever demean anyone for their ideas. I don't. I meet people who believe that aliens visit the planet. I've met people that believe that God created all life. I meet people who believe life just evolved through a set of circumstances. I am no more judgmental or rude to any version as long as people show the same respect back to me. I think in our eagerness to share science, we have a tendency to use terms that I think are very disrespectful, and there's no reason for it. If somebody comes up to me and tells me they believe the earth is flat, then there's not a lot of room for debate, because if you've seen the same evidence I've seen and you concluded that the earth is flat, then I can't change your mind, and debate is not of any value to either party because it's going to lead to confrontation. So I simply say, I appreciate your point of view, but I don't share it. And in 99.5% of the time, that concludes and stops any argument, and then people go about their business and everybody's fine. To look at that person and say, how stupid are you to think the earth is flat, is almost an arrogance that can cause ill will towards anything I say. So if I'm a person of science and I disagree with what you say, I don't have to tell you you're stupid that you believe it. I don't have to engage it. I certainly don't have to embrace it, but I can ignore it, but still be respectful that it is a human being that's proposing it. And so, yes, I do think that sometimes the manner that we dismiss things that we recognize as not having science to support it can be viewed or accepted as arrogance, and that doesn't help anything. That doesn't help the cause of advancing science. And I appreciate the science side. I mean, if you've dedicated your life to studying something and somebody dismisses what you've done with no science to support their idea, yes, that must be very frustrating. But again, you're not going to change their mind, so why make an enemy of them? Because maybe if you're respectful to their differing opinion, maybe they're going to be more likely to let tidbits of your ideas begin to sink in. And slowly, you may change their ideas with your scientific fact. But calling somebody stupid that almost ensures that they will never consider your side. And I am respectful, but I'm not, I mean, if somebody's rude to me, and that happens a lot where I run into creationists that call me evil and tell me I'm going to go to hell and all of these things. And the way I end those conversations, and I said, well, if God exists, would he want you to be as rude to people as you are? And that usually gets them to stop and think, well, how do they defend that? I mean, unless you're with the Westboro Baptist lunatic group, who believe that you're punished for not believing. I just don't think it serves us any purpose to attack people's opinions that don't agree with us.
Vast majority of religious people accept evolution. It's only the creationist fundamentalist fringe that is so vocal about it. Most people don't believe in evolution.
Well, you make a good point, Scott. When I was little, we had to go to Catholic school. Catechism is what it's called. It's more like just learning about stuff. And I can remember the Catholic nuns saying that the world was millions of years old and that dinosaurs evolved from this animal. The only thing that varied is how they believe that life got its start. And really, when you come down to it, that's really the only disagreements. Did life begin through a series of things, or was a higher power start those things in motion? And so you're right. Most people don't. Again, I have people that believe that dinosaurs and man lived together. Well, to each his own. I don't believe that, but I think you're right. I think the majority of the Christians that I meet have no problems believing dinosaurs came before man, and no problems with believing that animals evolve. I just think the only thing that differs, the only fork in the road, is how that life began.
Well, my attitude is you can believe whatever you want to believe. I mean, if you believe the sun is a giant candle, I mean, that's your opinion, but I want to see some evidence before I believe any of that.
Right. And good point, Sam. And again, if I try to beat you over the head with my version, you're going to be less receptive to what I propose as evidence. And if I propose as evidence something that simply cannot be believable or verified, then you have the right to question it. But if I tell you you're stupid because you believe the sun is a candle, your and my conversation has ended, and you have no interest in what I have to say. And so I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, Christopher, I'd be interested to know what is your opinion of that?
Well, I'm actually kind of in the same way as you are, and also with Sam. I just feel like that. I respect everybody's opinion. I mean, you can believe what you want to believe, and but I fall into the science spectrum, because I tend to say science is my religion, and I would actually just say I want to see evidence to actually know that you're valid, and that's all I care about is. But even though if you actually still believe in what you want to believe, that's fine with me. I'm not going to argue against that.
But I will say, I do get frustrated when people who do have opinions that are not necessarily based on science but are based on emotion. I do dislike when they attempt to demand that their ideas be treated as an equal to those that have hard scientific evidence. Feelings cannot trump science research, and so I don't like. I mean, when I say I'm open-minded and I'm willing to be respectful, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that I think everybody should have the exact same say, and that school, we should be teaching in school, here's the 27 different versions of what we think are reality. I do think science has to be the thing that at least education is based on. And then if it's a matter of feeling or faith, that's your own personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an agnostic, by the way, but I do think that the academics could do a better job of reaching out to lay people and explaining these things like radiometric dating and the order of the fossil record, like the evolution of whales, horses, to do a better job of simplifying this stuff and explaining it to lay people so they have a better understanding of it.
I completely agree, Scott, and that's put very well. If we spend as much time talking as we spend yelling or degrading people, it's the same with politics now. Oh my God. You don't even want to start a conversation because of where it leads. And that's a shame, because that's what stops the thought process, is when it comes down to my way or the highway, nobody wins. Truly nobody wins.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Greg, if you don't mind, I'll take this next question if you don't mind.
Okay, you've got one already?
Yeah. I'll take this one out of your list here, and
Okay.
I would actually ask if you could make your own Jurassic Park or whatever name you assign your theme park or zoo, what types of dinosaurs or other prehistoric animals would you stock at the park? Would you also make the park more like an actual zoo or less like a theme park?
Ooh, man, what a cool question. I would make it more of a zoo, in that the modern zoo, not a bunch of cages lined up with animals trapped in them. I would like to create ecosystems where the park would be divided into time periods, but not as broad as Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, but as here's the Triassic section, and as you move through, you're moving through time. The Jurassic section, what you see early, mid, and late. And then when you get into Cretaceous, early, mid, and late. So that you could truly put animals from the same time periods together to see their interaction. But I can't imagine doing it as a theme park where I would ever put the public in relationship with the animals, but I would definitely take advantage of all the technology with video. So you could visit my park, Christopher, but from your home, and you would have the ability to go on a safari, and this is how much it costs for you to visit here. This is how much it costs for you to visit there. So you would be able to go visit these animals, and maybe I would even do something like I would install a critter cam on the head of a Diplodocus. And for the low price, Christopher, of $29.95, you can see what Diplodocus sees in a day. And you get to ride around on him, and you get to record it, and you get to watch it, and you get to play it. So I would do those kind of interactives, but I wouldn't put the public in relationship to them, because I think with too much public interaction, I think you would lose what would be normal animal behavior. Look at zoos today. You know, nothing is more depressing than going to a zoo and seeing a bunch of bears sit on their rump and wave their hand because they know somebody will put a quarter in the machine and throw them a treat. That's not the behavior I want to see. So I would make it very public access, but it would all be video, and I would separate my animals by time period. And certainly I would have my carnivores, and as much as I hate to say it, my carnivores would be fed live animals. You know, if I had a herd of duckbills and I have to thin the herd, a live duckbill is going in the carnivore section, And that costs you $99.95, by the way, Christopher, if you want to see, because you're willing to pay more, I bet, to see a Tyrannosaurus kill a baby duckbill than you will be to ride on the back of a Diplodocus. So I would fund it through videos, and you'd visit through video, but I wouldn't want my animals to see too much human interaction. I would want them to act and behave the way they normally would.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I think you would have PETA breathing down your neck if you did that.
Or insert other radical animal rights organization.
You know, that's why it'd all be video. Because if anybody showed up to picket me, then for $129.95, Christopher, you get to see raptors eat a PETA person. So I'm kidding. Calm down, world. I guarantee you right now there are people screaming and yelling my name. It's a joke. It's a joke. Believe me, if we didn't have people, acting in behalf of the wildlife, there wouldn't be any wildlife. Let me clear the air right now. But I'm just saying, I've taken Christopher for a fortune, but I know he's going to come up with $129 to see whether or not a person can outrun a Deinonychus. The 100-yard dash became a lot more interesting.
Oh, man.
Pita bread.
That's what you would call the money that would be used to buy the right to watch. You have to spend your pita bread. You could buy pita bread bucks on my website for the low price of $150, and you can spend pita bread any way you want. That's so rude. I have got good friends that are associated with PETA. You watch. They are going to go... They're not going to find humor in this at all. So rude.
Okay, if we got that question out of the way, here's the next one. If you were given the ability to direct your own movie with dinosaurs or prehistoric animals, what genre would you set it in, and what would the plot be?
Oh, boy. It would... Wow, what a hard question. As much as I love Allosaurus, that's the dinosaur I loved my entire life. And there's so many cool dinosaurs in and around the Jurassic. I would say that if I had the funds to do a movie, I would focus on the Jurassic, but I would spend more time with the Stegosaurs. There's some new evidence that suggests they have a different stance than what we first thought, and so there's some new insight into Stegosaurs. But I think if I was doing a movie, I would think that it would do it sort of the way Bob Bacher did Raptor Red, where maybe we would follow a young Allosaur from nest till death and follow it and how it interacts and see through its eyes what's going on, and actually use the camera as the eyes, where the majority of the time we're looking through its eyes at everything it's doing. So it's hunting with its adults, it's watching an adult hunt, it's learning how to do that, it's interacting with its brothers or sisters. I don't know, that would be interesting to do sort of a history of that animal nest to death, where we see it come out of the egg. We see from the opening scene, I can imagine the inside of an egg and seeing it crack and poke, and you poke a little hole, and what you see staring back is an eye that's half the size of the egg, scare the living crud out of you. And that's your first look at your parent, at your mom. But I think that would be sort of an interesting journey. Not having it talk. I don't like the Disney stuff where they speak English or any of that stuff. But I think having a narrator describe what's going on might be an interesting way to do it, maybe.
I agree with that.
Yep.
If it was David Attenborough doing the narration, that would be perfect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Him or Pee Wee Herman. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Or Bobcat Goldthwait.
Can we talk about that mysterious tooth object Loch Ness. Can you just tell us your involvement in the whole controversy?
Oh, with Loch Ness? Yeah. Steve Alton, several years ago, I had Steve as a guest on Jurassic Fight Club when we were doing an episode of Megalodon. And Steve had mentioned to me about a tooth that was discovered by some folks. And he said he had never seen anything like this tooth. And he asked me if I would be willing to look at it and give him an idea of whether or not I thought the tooth was a plesiosaur. So he sent me a couple of high-resolution images. And I absolutely immediately said that is absolutely not a plesiosaur tooth. It has, in fact, it kind of resembled more of some of the prehistoric sawfish teeth that I've seen in the past without the without the backwards pointing hook on the end. And it looked a lot like the sawfish. And so he showed me the tooth and I said, this absolutely looks like a tooth. But from what the animal is, I don't know, because I looked really closely at it. Because he told me, do I think it was carved? Do I think it was something manufactured? Well, based on what I looked at and the things that I could see in this high-resolution picture, I had absolutely no doubt whatsoever that whatever that was, it was natural, that it wasn't something that had been carved. The connection to where it would have fit into the jaw does not look like something that anybody could recreate. And he said, do you think it's a deer antler? Well, no, because deer antlers, if you've ever seen one, they're more flattened and button-shaped like a mushroom. They're not deeply convex shaped where they come down to almost a cone. So I couldn't comment as to what it was, but I did comment as to what I believe it was not. And in my opinion, it was not fabricated, and it was not a tooth from any prehistoric animal that I'd ever seen. And that's pretty much the extent of what I know about it, Scott.
Okay, thank you. Some people think it's the tooth of a giant eel, possibly.
Yeah, and that's he didn't tell me that initially. I will say that Steve did not lead me down a path to get me to give him the answer he wanted. That's not what he did. But after I told him that I thought it was authentic, whatever it was, and that it was not a prehistoric animal that I was familiar with, he said, have you ever seen the teeth of a conger eel or eels? And I said, yeah, I'm very familiar with moray eels. I have had a huge aquarium with 8 different species of eel in it. So I'm very familiar with their teeth. And I said, well, based on the recurvature, it could certainly be, but that would have to be an enormous eel, which he jumped for joy and said, that's exactly what I'm hoping it is. So it certainly had the shape of one. Whether it is or not, I don't know. Do you know if anybody ever tested like DNA sample off of it?
Somebody made off with a tooth. Some guy, game warden.
Oh God.
And his tooth disappeared.
Oh man.
For the photograph. So hopefully at some point it will turn up. I hope.
That would be interesting to see if it was an authentic tooth and what it belonged to. That would be very interesting. What a shame. What a shame. Well.
I'm a cryptozoologist, so I'm...
Sure. Well, whatever it was certainly interesting. I'd love to be able to look at it. I wish I could see it because I'd love to see some DNA. That'd be kind of interesting as well. But whatever it was, again, Scott, I thought it was real, whatever it belonged to. I thought it just did not look fabricated to me. But I'm basing that off of high-resolution images.
I know the prehistoric sawfish.
You dropped off, Scott. I couldn't hear you.
I said I know about the prehistoric sawfish you're talking about.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Also, a primitive beaked whale that has teeth with denticles like that too.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. There's so many oddities out there. Who knows? But it just didn't look fossilized to me. Was my concern. It didn't look like it was a fossil. It looked like it was, modern.
If there's a nessie, maybe that's its tooth.
We still don't know yet. If it is, you don't want to get bit. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, I've got the next question here for Sam in the chat bar.
How likely is it that some species of pterosaurs might have evolved to become flightless if they hadn't gone extinct?
I don't think, Sam, they would have evolved to become flightless, because if you look at the fossil record, they start small and they grow large. And the larger they get, the more aerodynamic they become, and the more they have the ability to glide with little effort. So if you're going to evolve, it's for three reasons. Your environment changed, your food source has changed, or you're just not very successful the way you are. But when you look at pterosaurs, they're very successful, very diverse group of animals, but they all retained that same basic body design. So it's like a shark. Why change if what you got works? So I don't believe they would have ever lost the ability to fly, because there didn't seem to, the environment didn't change, the wind didn't stop blowing, and their food sources didn't change. They're still shore animals. They're still feeding the vast majority of animals. So I don't think there was a reason to change. I think if we would have seen some changes, if they would have continued on, I think it would have been more unusual crest development, where we would have seen just such a bunch of alien-looking dudes with very odd-looking head crests. I think those may have changed, but other than that, I don't believe the basic body design would have changed, because I don't see a reason to do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, here's the next question. Is there any natural history museum that you have not yet visited and want to check out someday?
The museum in Beijing, I always wanted to visit. I've pretty much visited all of the major ones here in the United States. Oh, no, I take it back. Bozeman. Two. I take it back again. The Bozeman Museum in Montana, I'm dying to see, but I also really want to go up and visit Dr. Curry's museum in Canada. I am really itching to get back up there. I usually go every August to go speak at some very good friends of mine manage a dinosaur walk-through park that has the robotic dinosaurs, and I go up there every year to do a series of talks. And I am hoping that I get to go back up there, and if I do, we're going to go up there and see his museum. So those two are the last really two on my bucket list here for North America, is the museum that Dr. Curry has. I don't remember the name of it. And then the Bozeman Museum. I'd like to see both of them.
Those are some museums I might consider go checking out someday, George. And thank you. I'll let Chris answer. Let him ask the next question of his choice.
Okay. What are your views on Jack Horner's project with retro-engineering dinosaurs from chicken embryos?
I find it absolutely fascinating what little I know about it, but I don't know enough to be able to speak intelligently as to what the results have been. I've seen what the media announces, but sometimes you got to take that with a grain of salt, because again, they want to lean towards the sensationalism. I find it fascinating, but it always goes back to that question, should we? Just because we can. I don't know if you're going to begin to bring animals to life that have been genetically altered, and what quality of life does the animal have? Because that would be the next step, would be to obviously hatch one of these things and see what we can come up with. Do we dismiss the animal's life as absolutely nothing because we want to play around? We want to see, can I make this next one be born with teeth? No, he turned out to have two heads. We'll cut him off and let's start over. I don't know if we ever get to that point where we do that. That's the same thing I feel about the cloning of the mammoths. I find it fascinating. I would probably be the first guy in line to buy a ticket to go see it. But is it the right thing to do? Is it for scientists to create life instead of figuring out other things? It's a hard one, man. I find it fascinating from what I've seen. I wish I knew more about it. But the idea of my chicken hatching and then killing me scares the tar out of me. So I don't know, man. I wish I had more time to get into it. I wish I knew more about it to answer with a better answer than could we. I'll say this, and I saw somebody else say this, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but I saw somebody, what was it? But he said, the boy in me wants to see that living dinosaur, but the man and the science in me is questioning whether it's the appropriate thing to do. And I think that's kind of it. The kid in me would love to see it, man. But is it? Should we be doing it? You know, not for me. That's a step above my pay grade to answer. Like I said, I'll be there in line to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is on Sam.
What were the largest species of ceratopsian and hadrosaur that would have been preyed on by Deinosuchus throughout its range?
Well, I know that there was a couple of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, at least here in Texas in the Big Bend regions where Deinosuchus has been found. So certainly I don't know if there was any limitation to what they would have attempted to get, but I think it would have been the conditions that would have determined that. If the ceratopsian comes to the edge of the river to drink and those horns are facing the water, I don't even know if Deinosuchus messes with the animal. And that goes back to the other part, which is, can Deinosuchus even hunt like a modern crocodile? Because of its size, how does it hide? It would have to find the perfect place where there would be a very dramatic drop-off in depth where it could hide its mass and still be close enough to see the animals drinking to ambush them. So if it's that scenario where they only go up to the water's edge to drink, I don't even think he messes with ceratopsians. I think he probably looks at them the way crocodiles look at rhinos. And that is, you just drink your fill and I'll wait for the next guy to come along. Hadrosaurs would have been different. I think they would have grabbed them no matter how big. But if dinosaurs drink the way some larger herbivores drink, which is they walk out into the water to chest deep water, then if Deinosuchus acted the way modern crocodiles act, it's a group party. Everybody's invited. You grab whoever it is and your buddies hang on as well and you drag it underwater. So I don't think there would have been any size limitations for Deinosuchus other than big sauropods. I think the only determining factor for Deinosuchus is, do I think that thing can kill me? And if it can, it's not going to be worth the risk. But once you walk into the water and you're up to your chest in the water, your horns become irrelevant because now I can come around behind you or from the side. I don't have to attack your head. But that's a very interesting question. I just think they're going to see everything as a food source and take advantage whenever the conditions are right. But if they're drinking from the shore, I don't think they're messing with any grown ceratopsian. I think babies are the target.
Personally, I would actually be more terrified of Deinosuchus than I would be a T-Rex.
Yeah.
Because you can see the T-Rex coming, but the Deinosuchus can sneak up on you.
Yeah. I've often wondered if Deinosuchus was so big, did he hide in plain sight? Did he lay along the shore? And did dinosaurs ignore it as a tree? Maybe he's not ambushing. Maybe he's laying there waiting for somebody foolish enough to walk within grabbing, and then he grabs them and goes into the water with them. I don't know, but I've always questioned what would be the hunting method. But I would agree with you. What a terrifying notion that a crocodile of that size could be, just submerged beneath the surface, and I have no idea he's there, but he knows I'm there. That's a pretty scary notion.
Yeah, consider modern-day crocodiles, even ones as large as 17 feet, can hide just like 3 or 4 feet of water.
Right.
It's not a stretch that of even larger 30-footer like Deinosuchus could remain concealed in like 10 feet deep of water.
Right.
While someone's coming for a drink. And the force that these things can exert when they bite, is very high.
Yeah.
Very high. I've seen some figures.
Ugh.
Okay, here's the next question from group member Raymond Minton about sauropods. How did sauropods lay eggs, considering the distance the eggs had to fall? Is it possible that they had ovipositors like sea turtles and as portrayed in Walking with Dinosaurs?
I don't know if any evidence has been demonstrated that they had those retractable egg tubes. I would think that it would require some sort of musculature attachment that allowed it to move in and out. And if that was the case, then there would be some kind of scarring on the bones of the pelvis for those muscles to have connected. Now, I may be completely off base. I don't know how sea turtles extend and retract theirs, but certainly it's a long distance from the female to the ground. And all the evidence that I've seen has suggested that they may have squatted to lean back to get close enough to drop the eggs. And one other thing that may be a possibility. Now, let me say right now, I've never seen any evidence to support this, but what if the eggs were soft upon being laid, but then became hardened over time? So they're not as fragile initially. What if that egg shell is something that stiffened and became hard and brittle after the eggs had been laid, so that it almost is a rubbery-like drop when you hit, you bounce, and then over time the egg. And again, there's no evidence that I've ever seen in my life that would support this. I'm just throwing it out as a what if. But I think it would be more likely that the females would have kind of squatted down and deposited the eggs, which may be why you don't see a lot of egg nest where the eggs are piled on top of each other but are separated. Like with with Massospondylus, where the female seemed to have laid them in a row. Well, that requires squatting down and getting your butt close to the ground where you can deposit them side by side. You can't do it from the higher elevation. So maybe they are laying those eggs with more caution instead of just dropping them, because if they just drop them, now, again, they would have the ability to nuzzle them with their nose to spread them out maybe, but I don't know. I'm more in the camp of they kind of squatted and did it there, and then if you broke, well, you broke, but who knows.
That sounds like something I would agree with, George.
Yeah.
It sounds more plausible than having an organ like an ovipositor.
Right.
Okay, here, Scott, if you got any more marine animal questions, go right on ahead.
What is your opinion on the whole Paleocene dinosaur controversy?
Go ahead, Scott.
They have found some post-Cretaceous dinosaur fossils, particularly the Hadrosaur femur in New Mexico, that have been radiometrically dated as occurring in the Paleocene. And there's a whole controversy about whether these are legitimately survivors from the case or reworked fossils.
Right. It's always tough. I'll tell you something that I saw that amazed me once. I had a man bring me a fossilized canid, a baby dog or a wolf or a coyote, whatever it was, but it was fossilized. And they had found it in the Aguja Formation in Big Bend, and that's late Cretaceous. And he said, this is definitive proof that dogs are living in the late Cretaceous. Well, what it turned out is that they think the female burrowed to build a nest or a burrow to have her puppies, and she burrowed down into the Cretaceous Formation, and then the baby was encased during a flood and was fossilized within that Cretaceous Formation, but it was not there during that time. It had been deposited. So sometimes the evidence can be a little confusing, and sometimes there's a lot of uplifting of some sediment layers that are mixed with others, and that can be the case. But I don't know. I've not seen enough yet for me to say that I believe that any dinosaur made it beyond. And beyond meaning more than maybe 1,000 years after the extinction event. I certainly think that some dinosaurs had to survive. They didn't all drop over dead that afternoon. They had to survive. But in order to survive that long into the Paleocene, it would have taken tens of thousands of generations to continue the species up until that time. So to find an individual bone, it would be more likely to find Paleocene fossils than late Cretaceous fossils because of the age difference. We have more Paleocene formations, and so we would have seen tens of thousands upon thousands of generations to ultimately get to the Paleocene. And since that doesn't exist, my gut tells me that it would have just been reworked, but I'm not close enough to the research to know what has been legitimately done and what has been done by somebody. Let's say, was it done in an accredited lab where they've also done other work? I don't know enough about it to speak, but my guess would be it doesn't. I've never seen any evidence to support that any of the terrestrial non-avian dinosaurs survived after the late Cretaceous.
The best case so far is the hadrosaurus femur from New Mexico. Yeah. There are some dinosaur teeth that are thought to be reworked as young as the Miocene period.
Wow. Well, it would be interesting. The old line, life finds a way. Animals that were on this planet for 100 million years can usually figure out a way to get around almost anything because clearly they've done it. So it would not surprise me if it ever was definitively accepted and proven in science, but I just don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's highly controversial. The point is that they did not survive enough to take the other.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's more about erosion than anything else, because I think sometimes once any of the Cretaceous rocks that have been exposed to wind and water and all that sorts of stuff, then sometimes the Paleocene layers might actually pile on top of that bone, and then all of a sudden it might actually look like it actually is, a hadrosaur has survived into the Paleocene, and it might be just a case of that parts of that layer was actually eroded and it actually exposed the bone, and then all of a sudden the Paleocene sediments actually came in and actually just buried it.
A lot of these reworked fossils are found in river channels, and it's thought that the river action pulled them out of their original sediments.
Yeah, that's basically kind of like the same thing with Titanis whalleri, where fossils of them have been found in Florida, and because divers actually found some of the bones, and I can't remember where. I think it was actually in the bottom of a lake. I can't remember, but they were actually into sediments that were 10,000 years old, and thinking people were thinking oh, maybe terror birds were actually in the time when humans arrived in North America, but I don't believe that. I think it's just basically the case the bones were just washed from their original place.
And plesiosaur bones found in glacial deposits, and it's thought what happened is that glaciers were moving through, they ground down into the Cretaceous sediment and uprooted.
Yep. Right. Yep, that's more likely.
Okay, that was a very interesting topic. Now I'm going to pull off another question from the list here. Okay, let me find here. Okay, time to bring the big G into the equation here. What are your overall thoughts on Godzilla and other prehistoric type kaiju in general, like King Kong and etc., so forth?
I'm a huge fan of Godzilla. I'm a huge fan of all of the monsters. As a kid, like I said, we used to have 3 TV stations when I was a kid, and what I used to do every Sunday when the TV guide would come out for that week, I would run and grab the newspaper and pull out the TV guide and go right to Saturday night and Friday night and go right down the list to see what was playing. And if a Godzilla movie or any giant monster movie or giant insect movie was coming on, like the the black scorpion or the tarantula or any of those, the week was torture because it would go by so slow. So I'm a huge fan of them, and I love them. I don't like, there was a time where they relied too much on animation, poor animation, to make a lot of the movies. And so I don't like poorly done monster movies. I dislike poorly done monster movies like Yungari, the one that they did on Sci-Fi Channel. I didn't like that show at all because I thought it was poorly done, and I don't like that. But, or like, you know, Raptor Island or any of those that were made for the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't like those, but I love any of the Godzilla movies, young and old. I love them all, man. And I loved Pacific Rim. It's one of the few movies I've ever gone back to the theater more than once to see. I rarely do that. I went back twice to see Pacific Rim because I loved it that much.
I always saw it once, but that once was good enough for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
what's more awesome than giant robots beating the crap out of other giant monsters?
And I love the monster designs too. They were believable, you know? They weren't so completely far-fetched. They were believable. I love that show a lot, man. I still love it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's good to know we have a big-time Godzilla fan in the house here.
You bet. I can't wait to see. My two favorite was Gigan and Ghidorah. Those are the ones I love the most. Gigan was my favorite growing up. But I am so thrilled to hear, you know, you and I were talking earlier, Greg, before you started this, we're talking about the new Godzilla that comes out where Ghidorah is going to be in it. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I see a lot of potentials of what he could look like.
Yeah.
Hoping he looks as good as some of those concept span arts I've seen on DeviantArt.
Yeah.
One of my personal favorites has always been Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the whole notion of Mechagodzilla was pretty cool. The whole notion of building a robot to fight a monster, but make him resemble the monster he's going to fight was kind of an interesting concept.
And how he was controlled by those ape-like aliens from another planet.
Yeah, that was cool.
Seen, Yog Monster from Space.
What's that?
Have you ever seen Yog Monster from Space?
Yes, loved it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. You know, a genre that doesn't get a lot of attention, at least with the people that I know, is some of the stuff that's being done, not in Japan. What country are they? One was some kind of an animal that lived in a sewer that looked like an amphibian. You guys ever see that? You know what I'm talking about?
It's a Korean movie.
Korea, yeah.
The Host.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I like some of the stuff coming out of there. I like the animals. I think they look pretty cool.
You know, there were some giant amphibians. There was Deinosuchus and Deinosuchus.
Yeah.
I think Deinosuchus is thought to have gotten 30 feet long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had our share of monsters on this planet. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, on to the next question about speculative dinosaurs. How do you think non-avian dinosaurs would have turned out if the KT extinction never happened, or in simple terms, if the asteroid strike that took them out missed hitting the planet?
I think we would have seen. Now, again, it's all going to be based on environment, because the environment sets the tone for evolution. If the environment doesn't change and you're effective at what you are, you don't need to change. But if you speculate that the environment was going to take a change, I think gigantism would have been the thing that you would have seen slowly disappearing. I think tyrannosaurs would have gone back to being more medium-sized predators. I think the sauropods would have retained the sauropod look, but have just been reduced. And the only reason why I say that is gigantism comes with a price. When your environment changes, you're the ones to suffer the most. And so I think we would have seen fewer gigantic dinosaurs, and I think we would have seen more medium-sized dinosaurs. And that may have been the only change that I could think of.
That's something I
With
have
reduction in dinosaur size have opened the door for mammals to it.
Well, that's a good point. If dinosaur, yeah, I mean, what a great point. Would there ever been a rise of mammals? Would we have ever shown up had they done that. Now, if they reduced to smaller sizes, and mammals probably still would have been relegated to nocturnal, but maybe mammals would have had a chance had there not been such large dinosaurs to prevent them from ever getting a foothold. Maybe they would have, but that's a great question, is would mammals have ever taken a spot, or would it just been, would dinosaurs have literally just continued to rule the world? I don't know. That's a great question.
Okay, Scott, here's a cryptozoology question I'll have you ask here in the chat bar.
I can't see it. Go ahead.
The question is, what are your thoughts on cryptozoology overall and the possibility of prehistoric survivor cryptids in our modern day and age?
I like cryptozoology in that it is willing to not slam the door on things we cannot see or hold or feel. And it's an important part of science to always remember that we have been wrong on a number of occasions of things that we said couldn't happen that did. You look at, what's his name? The coelacanth, the fish. So I personally don't spend a lot of time looking into it. I find it fascinating. So I can't speak to the validity of it because it's not something that I study. I don't study the idea of changing time, so I can't speak intelligently about that because I don't know enough to understand how it works. But I do appreciate and respect people who are willing to look at things from a different perspective, and if they find that what they believe is the fact, good on them. If they don't, how does it hurt me? If somebody believes that that Bigfoot is alive, how does that affect me? If you believe it's alive and I don't, how does that affect me adversely? What does that do to me? It doesn't do anything to me. I don't have to embrace it, but I don't have to dismiss it. And so I am respectful of everybody, of what they believe. I find it fascinating because there is one thing that I will say of my limited knowledge of cryptozoology is everything that I know that cryptozoologists claim to be here almost always has some fossil record animal that has a relationship. And so that to me would suggest that there is legitimate basis for questioning its existence. It's not that things are just being pulled out of midair and being described as having 27 heads and 300 arms. It's more of plesiosaur, Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, Gigantopithecus, the giant, the thunderbird that the Native Americans claim to have seen happens to look like Argentavis. Throughout history, cultures have all had beliefs in things that we may not believe existed, but they did. And so I'm respectful of that.
Yeah, I thought exactly. And here's the next question that I'll let Chris ask you.
All right. Just pull up that question there, Greg. I'm kind of...
Okay, the question is it likely that dinosaurs played with each other in the same way that modern animals do?
Yeah, playing with each other is not always necessarily the end result we think of in play. When we play, we get joy and a sense of camaraderie and sort of a union that we bond with people when we play. But animals play, I think, is got a different end result, and that is the honing of one's skills to hunt or be chased or get away. And so I think sometimes we see deer, fawns chasing each other in a circle around, and they do seem to be enjoying it. It doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to be work related, but I think for them, it is more of a thing that they do that hones their ultimate survival skills. A kitten will play with a ball for an hour because it's practicing catching a mouse. Now, it's enjoyable for the kitten to do it, and so I guess you could technically refer to that as play, but they have an end result to gain from that, and that is a honing of the skills. So there's no reason to believe that dinosaurs wouldn't have used those same tactics. You know, I could see a baby tyrannosaur chasing a dragonfly nonstop. The tyrannosaur may be enjoying it, but he may not realize that's a built-in behavior that ensures his ability to chase something bigger as he gets older. So I think it would have been something we would have seen. I think we would have seen them playing tag. The only difference is if you play tag with a raptor, when he tags you, you're not it, you're dead.
Now, if humans play, is that a vestigial behavior that's left over from our animal past?
You know, and that could be, Scott, but it could also be that one of the behaviors that I think gave man his ability to survive that tough environment was our ability to become a group, a pack, a herd, a family. And so playing, I think, is a way to create that family bond with somebody you don't know and makes you closer together. And so the long answer to your question could be maybe so, because maybe our behavior that's been passed down is our need to be included in things to keep us safe. You know, we all want to show up to the same party. We all want to play the same board game. And it's because it bonds us as a group and brings us closer. And I think that in itself makes us feel more secure as a species, because I think in the back of our mind, there's always a saber-toothed tiger around the next corner. So I always want to be with my group because we're more likely to be able to defend ourselves against it than if we're by ourselves.
Yes.
All right. And I think I'll take this other one here, Greg. Which prehistoric animal has the largest coprolite that you know that you have ever seen in person or otherwise know about?
It's got it. The biggest coprolite I've ever seen has been one that's been attributed to Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was a big one. Now I know what killed the dinosaurs. This thing, you know, getting back to whether dinosaurs screamed and roared, I think they did based on that evidence.
In the words of Ian Malcolm, that's one big pile of shit.
Yeah. So see, I think, thank you, Sam, for joining in.
Just had to throw in that.
Thank you.
Throwing that joke.
Thank you, Sam. That was a great way to put that. Yes. So
One big pile of crap.
the biggest one I've ever seen was the one that's attributed to Tyrannosaurus Rex, and that's the biggest. You know, the reason why I don't think we find giant coprolites like those from sauropods is the distance they dropped. Because when they came out and hit the ground, it was kersplat, and they broke into tons of little pieces versus one big giant cow patty looking thing. So I think that if sauropod dung wouldn't have dropped from such a great distance, I think that would be the world record holder. But for now, it's that one that I saw that is attributed to Tyrannosaurus Rex.
All right.
Okay. And I got my question up here. It's a versus matchup. Do you believe that a pack of Utahraptors or Dakota Raptors could take down an adult Stegosaurus?
If they lived together, which they didn't, but if they did live together, the problem Stegosaurus has is he seems to be designed to take on big predators like Allosaurus or some of the big ceratosaurs. And so the weaponry on Stegosaurus is at the back, which means you got to turn your back to the attacker or at least turn broadside to the attacker to use your weapon. And that would limit your ability to, because your focus would be on the one that you're trying to hit. So if you're in a herd, maybe it's better. But if raptors attack the way I think raptors attack, they're not all going to come from the same direction. I think they're going to take on the same features that, say, wolves do, which is come from different directions. And unless Stegosaurus is in a herd, they couldn't defend themselves. The other problem with Stegosaurus defending itself in a herd is that tail swinging around. Your buddy better know to stay out of the way of your tail, and you better, so you really can't defend yourself as easily. You know, ceratopsians could go side by side or back to back, and their weapons are in the front, and they're perfectly suited for defending themselves against dromaeosaurs. But stegosauruses would have to stand flank to flank, but still be far enough away from each other to keep from hitting each other with their tail. And so I can't imagine them getting in that position. So I believe Utahraptors or Dakota raptors would have absolutely devastated animals like Stegosaurus. And I think had they lived with them, we would have seen body armor develop even more greater than we saw with the mid to late Cretaceous ankylosaurs. I think Stegosaurs would have ultimately had to become armored as well if they had to live with those guys in their environment.
That's kind of my thoughts exactly. Stegosaurs never evolved to deal with intelligent pack-hunting predators like raptors.
Right, right.
So they wouldn't know what to do.
That's it. I mean, what do you do?
Ankylosaurs and ceratopsians did evolve to deal with these kind of animals, as mentioned.
Right.
Okay, now here's the part where I'll let Scott ask more marine animal questions, since we just got done with our list we just made.
There was a bunch of weird semi-aquatic reptiles, quote, marine reptiles in the Triassic, like Canistropheus, the Topodentatus, the Placodonts, and they seem to have been replaced by more aquatic reptiles such as plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs. Do you think there was some kind of environmental change that sort of opted out these semi-aquatic forms in favor of more obligately aquatic reptiles?
You know, Scott, what I think is that being semi-aquatic puts you in front of carnivores in both environments. So you're dealing with land-dwelling carnivores who are trying to pick you off when you come on land, and you're dealing with sea-bearing predators that are picking you off when you're in the water. And if your skeletal structure is designed to take you from one to the other, then you're never really suited for either. You know, that short, squat body of an amphibian means you don't run very fast on land. But that short, fat body of an amphibian means you don't really swim as fast. And so I think the semi-aquatic animals had features that were actually detrimental to being preyed upon in either environment. And I think it was a series of attrition. I think that, look, if you're going to keep going on land to get away from me, the guys on the land are going to pick you off. And if you're going to keep coming into the water to get away from them, well, you either need to become aquatic or die. And I think they got wiped out through a series of attrition because they never made the choice of which one they wanted to be. And I think that then resulted in less evolutionary advancements to give them an advantage over either environment. And that's why, seriously, that's why I think they're gone, Scott. That's why they went and we're, you know, then we see the rise of the truly aquatic animals because they could handle their environment and do what they needed to do to survive.
And they have fossil records that last hundreds of millions of years as opposed to tens of millions of years like these semi-aquatic animals.
Correct. And I think that would demonstrate attrition more than anything, that it's a slow reduction of breeding animals over an extended period of time. And again, what's happening at that time is you have aquatic reptiles becoming much more efficient, and you have terrestrial dinosaurs or terrestrial animals becoming much more efficient. And yet these guys don't seem to be changing greatly either way. And they just, you know, they ultimately become lunch.
Yep.
Oh, no. Quite fascinating. This one's paleoartists. Are there any paleoartists that you really admired growing up and so forth?
Yeah. You know, as a kid, it was going into the Smithsonian Institute and seeing that big mural by Charles R. Knight. I can remember just staring at it and wishing it would come to life. and then getting a Time Life book and opening up the center page with that amazing mural of the Jurassic on one side, and it was the page you unfolded and looked at. Looking at his work was amazing. Dougal Dixon, I liked a lot of his work. I really like Mike Hallett. I think Mike Hallett does a good job. Now, these are the people from when I was, younger. Modern, Julia Sistani is beyond belief. Bonadonna, David Bonadonna is spectacular. As a matter of fact, I'm so enamored with his work. My truck has an image of his Torvosaurus on the side of my truck. That's how much I like him. And there's so many other good guys. I've got so many friends on Facebook that are incredible. Eric is a remarkable artist. My God, Zach Coker is really good. Some of these guys are so good. But, one of the images that I like the most, and it sounds crazy, is Gregory Paul's image, the black and white images of the skeleton with the animal over it. The outline of the animal around it. That, I don't know why. And then I started seeing Scott, oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. I just interviewed him for a website episode or
Scott Hartman.
How could I forget Scott Hartman's name? Scott does those as well. I actually like those a lot because they're scientific. They're neat, but God, name them all. Louis Ray is unbelievable. So, but the guys that impacted me were Charles R. Knight, and then Dougal Dixon later on. Those are the guys that I really liked a lot.
What about Janek Durian?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody else that does really well. Oh my gosh, what is her name? Karen
Carr.
Karen Carr. I like her stuff. I like Karen Carr's stuff too.
A really good mosasaur.
Yeah.
2 mosasaurs.
Yeah.
She also did a very good megalodon too. Very good. You can see her artwork in Indiana State Museum's displays.
Cool.
That's where I first really got to see it and see it as her work. And as for myself in paleo art, Douglas Henderson was one of the guys I really admired when I was growing up.
Yeah, he's good too.
Mark Cowitz. No, sorry. I mean, Todd Marshall is one of my personal favorites.
Yeah. It's really hard to make an animal look like it's living. A lot of people can sit down and draw, but has something, and I hate to use facial expression, but it has some, I don't know what it is, but it's hard for artists to ever catch that because there's nothing that can destroy an image worse than bad eyes. Because if their eyes don't look real to me, the animal does not look real.
All of Charles Knight's stuff looks alive.
It does. And something else, Scott, that I find interesting about his stuff? Doesn't it almost look like there's almost a mist or a fog or I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like you're looking backwards in time. Like it's not bright and sunny and cheery, and it's almost like you're going back in time when you look at his work.
Absolutely. He was the best.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more for the 20th century.
He was a big influence on Ray Harryhausen, too.
Was he?
Oh, yes, indeed.
I didn't know that.
The models for the dinosaurs in both Lost World and King Kong were based off of Knight's models and artwork.
Wow, I did not know that.
I mean, yes, many of the movies of the past were inspired by Knight's depictions of these animals.
Wow. That really is neat. That's kind of cool.
The cool thing is that Knight was young, met with Cope, and had submitted to him right before Cope died.
Really?
Yeah. He did.
Yeah.
Homework documentary. CBS made.
There are 2 good books I recommend on the subject of Charles Knight. One was written by Don Glut, another one was written by Richard Milner. Well, Charles R. Knight, The Artist Who Saw Through Time. And the other one was Dinosaurs, Mammoths, and Cavemen, The Art of Charles Knight by Don Glut and Sylvia Shirkus. Both are very good subjects on the matter. And the other one, from 2012, 2013, was put together with the involvement of Knight's granddaughter, Rhoda Culp.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to her, as a matter of fact. They were selling some of his work. And man, I wanted those brontotheres so bad I could taste it. I love those big brontotheriums, those big rhino-looking things. He did an artwork on that I love that, man.
Yeah, and I see it was a very moving experience for me when I went to the Field Museum this past August, and I saw Knight's artwork for the first time up on the walls there.
Wow.
They've been there for well over 60+ years.
God.
The real things, including the famous Tyrannosaurus Rex and Triceratops,
Yeah.
overlooking the Deinosuchus.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever look at some of the old paleo books and just enjoy yourself of what we thought we knew back then versus what we know today?
When I was growing up, yeah, I definitely did.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Little golden books, dinosaurs, and William Shealy's book, all that.
Isn't it great to see that image of Brachiosaurus standing in the ocean with just his nostrils protruding? Or there's one of an iguanodon perched on a tree like a bird with his toes wrapped around it. I have. And he's sitting there, and of course he has a horn on the end of his nose, and it looks so cool, man.
That's from the 19th century.
Yeah.
I saw that in one of Alan Debus's books on the subject.
I have a special soft spot for the artwork of Waterhouse Hawkins.
Yeah.
Great sea dragons. Yeah, I have that.
Yeah. And you figure he's drawing those with such limited knowledge at that time of what the animals were.
Absolutely.
Yes, of course, definitely.
There's a digital copy floating around the internet as a PDF.
Really?
Yeah, the Book of the Great Sea Dragon.
That's cool.
And there's also Richard Ellis's book, Sea Dragons, which also is a good book on marine reptiles. And Mr. Ellis himself is also a very gifted painter. If you've ever read any of his books on sharks, he does all the paintings in those books. They're very, very good. He's been doing it since the 70s at the least.
I've seen some pretty impressive paleo art on DeviantArt.
Yes.
DeviantArt's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, some of those artists are absolutely incredible, just incredible. And it almost makes you wonder if some of those artists were given an opportunity, how many greater images would we get to see? Thank God for things like DeviantArt, because that's paleo artistry is a tough job to get into as well. And once you're in, then you're in. But it's hard to get your foot in the door. So good things for things like that to expose some of the new up-and-coming artists.
Yeah, and on DeviantArt, you don't have to worry about, bigwigs, making you do what they want you to do.
Yeah.
Because some of them have that problem, actually.
Right.
You not only have to have art talent, but you have to have knowledge of anatomy as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's one thing Julius also is. He's also a trained scientist in addition to being an amazing artist.
Yeah.
He's published his own research, and his wife, Alexandra, also is an artist in her own right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get to meet her at Dino Fest, though. But Julius, he was a class act. That's all I can say.
He seems like a really nice guy.
Having met him in person, Sam can testify to that, too.
That's cool.
Last year it was Mark Schultz at Dino Fest doing the paleo art thing that day. Better known as the creator of Dinosaurs and Cadillacs.
Yeah, nice.
Been a long-time comic book artist. Also pretty good as a dinosaur artist, too. I actually have a signed print of his here at my house that I got from Dino Fest, which I got for a donation of $10.
Hey, it's cool.
Well, it didn't have to be $10. I just pitched in $10 because it went to a certain organization that he was supporting. So that was pretty cool.
What is that on your shirt, Greg?
That's a holotype Tyrannosaurus Rex from the Carnegie Museum.
Ah.
I figured I'd wear that today since, well, it was more than fitting.
I'm wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Yeah, you're still just a background of a swirly circle right now.
I see it. It's colossal fossils.
That's me.
That's
right.
Chris.
Yeah.
It's got a footprint on it.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, because
When Sam came on, I saw you were wearing Jurassic Park. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, but that movie greatly helped shape and influence my fascination with dinosaurs. I mean, I saw that when I was very young.
Right.
I was old enough to have seen it on opening day, back in, was it 1993?
It's cool.
Yeah, I think it too.
yeah,
92,
yeah,
93?
Well,
I got to see it.
All of your shirts are cool. I'd say Scott's is the coolest, but all of you guys are pretty good.
Yeah, because this one is actually the company that I mentioned earlier. It's Colossal Fossils, the traveling museum here in Boston, Wisconsin. And so, I know the guy who actually runs it. So hopefully he gives me a call sometime to actually do the Dino Days in May, and hopefully I get the chance to actually tell people how cool this Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton is, and
right,
because many people in where I'm from, they have never seen dinosaur fossils that much, and so it's a good opportunity for them to actually get to see this, because the only museums that you can go to in Wisconsin that you can possibly see dinosaurs is the Milwaukee Public Museum. There's the Kenosha Museum, or otherwise, if you want to go all the way to Minnesota, there's the Science Museum of Minnesota. They actually have a pretty good dinosaur collection, but I mean, it's not as big as what a lot of the other big name museums are, but it's a pretty decent amount, and luckily I got to be there when Extreme Dinosaurs exhibit actually came to Minnesota, and I got a chance to see that. Got to see some dinosaur skeletons I have never ever seen before, especially the ones from the southern hemisphere, like Giganotosaurus, Suchomimus, and Carcharodontosaurus, Majungasaurus. I've actually always wanted to see the Majungasaurus so bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, and I'm just amazed at how small it is compared to the others, considering that it's on an island, you know.
Yeah, that island thing, you know, reduced size is common on an island because of limited resources and that kind of stuff. But yeah, when I was looking at Majungasaurus / Majungatholus, used to be Majungatholus, looking at the skull, it was crazy. He looked wicked, man, a little knot on top of his head. But then when you look at the size, you're like, this is a little dude. It's like Carnotaurus. First time I saw a Carnotaurus, I couldn't believe how small it was compared to what my imagination thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I mean, even though that exhibit, it's actually I think it's in Toronto. I think it is, or in Ottawa, or somewhere around there. It's actually in Ottawa, and if anybody ever gets a chance to see it, go see it. I mean, it's amazing. You get to see like these dinosaur skeletons like you've never seen before. Because most of the dinosaur skeletons that you actually find are basically from North America or Europe.
Right.
I will. Oh, sorry, was somebody speaking already?
All right, Scott was trying to say something to Chris.
Oh, sorry about that.
I was going to ask Christopher if there were Mesozoic deposits in Minnesota.
Is there any deposits in Minnesota?
Yeah, Mesozoic era deposits in Minnesota. Are there any?
Mostly they are mostly in the western portion of Minnesota, but more typically the sedimentary stuff is more likely in the southwestern part of Minnesota, because that's when you actually get it like towards like South Dakota and like Nebraska, because those places actually have like the better remnants of like the Cretaceous, and but it's very limited. It's very, very limited.
A couple of museums that I would really love to visit. I haven't been to many museums, but on my Well, among the ones that I would like to visit the most are the Royal Tyrrell Museum and the George C. Page Museum.
Royal Tyrrell is really nice. Really nice. It's got a great collection. I want to say I think it's got 3 different Tyrannosaurs in it. Tyrannosauruses. Wow. Yeah, I think there's 3 of them. I know there's definitely 2. And yeah, it's a great museum. That was really neat. Carnegie is a great museum too.
Been there.
That's an Ottawa, right?
The Carnegie in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Carnegie's in Pittsburgh, right?
I went there last year. I loved that museum. Such an amazing collection of dinosaurs, wonderfully organized, good information.
Right.
Great selection of animals there, other things to see there too, like Egyptian things and among other things. But I love the prehistoric fauna the best.
Yeah.
That's where the type specimen of T-Rex now resides. The holotype now lives there.
Yeah, I guess on my list, I would actually like to see the American Museum of Natural History, and I'd like to go to the Smithsonian when they actually are finished.
Yeah.
With their dinosaur hall,
Yeah.
and I like to see. I also like to see the Royal Tyrrell. I like to see the Houston Museum.
Yeah, since they renovated it, I haven't been there yet, but since they renovated it, they say it is spectacular.
Okay, cool. Because I know Y-Rex is actually there.
Yeah, yeah.
The Stumpies, I like to call them.
I'm the owner of an elasmosaur vertebrate from Morocco.
Nice.
It was a gift from a friend of mine.
Elasmosaurs, plesiosaurs in general are amazing. I love all of the aquatic reptiles. I find them fascinating. And you know, when you think about how terrifying living in the Mesozoic would have been if you were on land, you know, there's no less stuff going on in the ocean, and if anything, worse, because at least on land you have the ability to run or climb a tree, but there wasn't much you could do if you were in the Mesozoic seas.
Yeah, Zophacinus and Cryptozoology too.
Yeah.
Besides the rest.
Hey, Scott, what is your opinion on Helicoprion, that shark with that jaw? Do you think the new way everybody displays it is correctly? Did you ever study that thing?
You know, I haven't really deeply looked into it, but if that's what they think it looks like now, then that's probably the latest thinking. It's probably correct. What a weird looking animal.
You know, that's the shark with the bottom jaw that has the curled teeth, the whirl of the.
Yeah.
What a weird thing, man.
And the fun fact, this thing's actually a shark relative, not even technically a true shark.
Oh, really?
It's more like akin to ratfish, chimeras, and those.
I didn't know that.
There were some weird sharks that had teeth on top of their dorsal fin. They had like flat dorsal fins on top.
Yeah.
Carboniferous.
Yeah, Stegosaurus.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they were weird looking dudes.
Like a comb almost.
Yeah, looks like a landing pad made of Velcro.
Something that males might have used for display, possibly.
The one I'm thinking of, I think, is called Stegosaurus.
Yeah,
the one I just mentioned with the funky dorsal fin with the denticles arranged out like a brush.
Yeah.
Or comb.
I've heard some people call it the ironing board shark because of the way the fin is shaped.
Right.
Yes, that's actually pretty appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That a Topodentatus is a weird animal too. The original thing was like it had a zipper running down the middle of its face.
That weird.
Now they out the vacuum cleaner hose.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't believe in aliens needs to just look at the fossil record, because those things are about as alien as it gets.
What about a Nomolocaris?
Yeah, that's another oddity. You know, for the longest time, they thought it was 3 different animals.
Yeah, I've read the Burgess Shell book. Yeah. Stephen Jay Gould. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said it makes me wonder how much we think we know today versus what we actually know. or what we're going to find out to be totally inaccurate. I wonder in 20 years if paleontologists will be laughing at what we thought we were so sure of, and now they've got like, oh my gosh, you couldn't have been more wrong. That's what I love about the science.
You know, something that you just said about the aliens, that actually reminds me of what Jack Horner said once. Jack Horner said once that as paleontologists, that they work with aliens all the time. I mean, anything that's extinct to us is alien to us.
Right.
Foreign.
Yeah. But that's a good point. And, you know, if we didn't pay attention to the fossils and we tried to force these animals into what we deem normal, we wouldn't be anywhere close. You know, look back at when they were first finding dinosaurs and they were trying to force them to match an animal that made sense to them, and how completely wrong they were. Whereas, you know, if you just follow the fossil record and then come to the realization there is nothing like it alive today, then the flood of information comes pouring out, and we're no longer breaking bones to try to articulate an animal the way we say he should stand. You know, breaking something's leg because you think its leg should be splayed out to the side of its body is about as absurd as it gets, and yet that happened, where they thought the dinosaur should have a reptilian stance, and so they broke the femurs to try to angle the legs out to make him stand the way we said he should stand.
I don't know. Fascinating.
Back in time,
Yeah.
it really was. Continents were in different places. The vegetation was different climate. It really, truly was a planet.
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to think of another good topic to start on here.
Well, I think the Permian has actually got the weirdest looking animals, especially with those mammal-like reptiles.
Yeah, the Gorgonopsians were just as weird as it gets. Deinosuchus, God, that thing looks like such an oddball.
Biggest one was called a Nostrancelia.
Yeah. Big, huge canine teeth, almost look dog-like.
Yeah, reptilian saber.
Yeah. Yeah, those
A lot of people don't realize that it was actually those animals that invented the saber teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
Smilodon simply just perfected it, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah, Smilodon just took it to a different level.
Yeah. I just think saber teeth have evolved in so many different families, so many different orders, different species, and all that. And that goes into a good question I have. Do you think it would be possible, hypothetically, one day that a saber-toothed predator might resurface in one shape or form?
I don't know why they wouldn't, except animals today are better suited to be able to defend against the long, thin teeth because the hides are relatively thick. But, you know, I don't know, man. Good question, actually.
Evolution.
Well, I mean, if you actually look at like the snow, that cat, and I think it's in South America or something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but it actually has the longest canine teeth out of any cat known today compared to body size. I can't remember what it was called. It's a mountainous like leopard.
That's the clouded leopard of Indonesia.
Clouded leopard, yeah, that's right.
And it's thought to be the closest relative of saber-toothed cats. However, how distant saber-toothed cats actually are related to modern cats genetically.
Yeah.
They weren't that closely related. That's the one thing I find fascinating about that. They are true cats, but they're part of a whole separate group, Macarodontidae.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I was going to ask George. Do you think that certain species of saber-toothed cat, like say Smilodon and Homotherium, lived in the same types of social groups that modern lions or wolves may have lived in?
You know, they don't find saber-tooths they don't find Smilodon in association with each other except for in the La Brea tar pits, but that's because the tar pits acted as a trap. So that's why they're there. But I do know that there's a cave called the Friesenhahn Cave here in Texas where they have taken out numerous Homotherium skeletons. And it does appear that they are living in family groups, because not only are they taking out dozens of Homotheriums, but they're also taking out dozens of bones from baby and juvenile mammoths. So apparently these cats are working in association with each other to drag these mammoths into this cave to eat them. And so that is a fairly good indicator that at least some of them had that familiar behavior. I don't know if saber-tooths did or not. You know, you look today and tigers are certainly effective hunters on their own, but that's because they live in a very dense environment. Animals that live out on the plains, boy, you'd think they'd almost have to rely on working as a group to be able to bring down. I mean, saber-tooth, the Smilodon was not incredibly fast, and he wasn't a long-distance runner by any stretch. So you would think ambush would be the thing that they would use to catch their prey, and that usually requires other members to be with you to either funnel the animals into a kill zone or to drive them to you. So I don't know. It would make sense based on what they're eating. You know, they're eating buffalo and they're eating horses and camels, and those are animals that live together, and everybody's on the lookout, and it's hard to sneak up on them. But I do think for certain Homotherium, I think he certainly hunted in a group, or at least lived in a group.
Now, for Smilodon, the evidence that they use to try to guesstimate as to being social is based on the fact that some of the animals they found there had very bad injuries, but they actually found that they survived for a considerable period of time afterwards.
Right.
That they would have been crippled from being able to hunt. This leads them to believe that they were actually being cared for by other members of the group until they were well enough to join the hunt once again.
Right.
That's from Rancho La Brea, for Smilodon specifically.
Yeah. Well, that's a good
It
point.
could have also been a good response to larger cats, like, say, the American lion, for example, which may have been more solitary.
Right.
I mean, with recent evidence coming out genetically that cave lions actually are a true distinct lion species from modern lions of the Panthera genus.
Right.
And being that they are the ancestors of the American lion, Panthera atrox, it just goes to show that Smilodon being a social group might have been a defense strategy against bigger predators like the short-faced bear and the American lion, possibly, too.
Right. Well, that's the
and
thing.
Also to compete with the dire wolf, which had packs of up to maybe 100 wolves, possibly.
Right. Yeah, if you share the environment with Arctodus simus, you better be able to defend yourself, because you're never going to get a bite to eat, because he's going to take everything. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all that they were group hunters. It would make a lot of sense.
I'll probably extend that to the South American species Smilodon populator, which was even larger than the American Fatalis genus.
Right.
Ground sloths would have been certainly required a group effort to take down if they even could get past their armor.
Right.
If they had any weak spots that they could exploit.
Yeah, you know, it makes for great imagery, but, you know, modern cats today, modern predators, are not simply going to attack anything they come in contact with. They're going to choose their targets, and I suspect prehistoric animals wouldn't have acted any differently, because you don't survive by just running up to anything and jumping on the back of a ground sloth and hoping you can kill him. I think you size him up long before that happens. So I don't know of how many of those battles actually took place, or is that more of just our imagination? We imagine because they live together. But, you know, that would be like if an artist proposed an image of a pack of lions attacking a healthy male elephant. Today, we would look at it and go, that doesn't make any sense at all, because that's not how they behave. And so I don't even know if they'd even mess with something like one of the big ground sloths.
Maybe one of the smaller ones, but I don't think they'd go for something besides, say, Megatherium, for example, unless it was like sickly or so forth.
Yeah, that's true.
But a different kind of cat, like a jaguar, with a different hunting strategy, could potentially kill an animal as big as a sloth, because having a stronger bite and targeting the brain, targeting the back of the skull to get to the brain.
Right.
A strategy for dealing with armored prey like tortoises and crocodilians.
Right.
So I picture a big jaguar being able to kill a ground sloth much easier than saber-toothed cats. Far more likely.
Now that you mention it, in my opinion, that's one of the problems with awesome bro culture. Awesome bro culture tends to depict predatory dinosaurs as just being mindless monsters that go around fighting and killing and eating everything that crosses their path.
Right.
I don't think they would have necessarily behaved like that in real life. In real life, I think they probably would have been a little bit more choosy with what they ate and what they didn't eat.
Well, that's exactly right. You don't survive for millions of years blindly rushing in with your mouth agape, grabbing anything, because you don't survive. So I think you're right. I think they would have been they would have targeted their prey much more than we give them credit for. And if, a healthy adult bull triceratops walks by, you simply let it walk on by because the possibility of never moving again is real. And so you just don't mess with them. And I think that's exactly what would happen. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if even dinosaurs as big as this Pterosaurus or Tyrannosaurus rex ever considered Triceratops a food source unless the Triceratops was sick, acting odd, or maybe by itself. I don't know. They're just too big.
T-Rex would have to be in a group to try to isolate a member of the herd before going in for an attack.
I think so.
Dinosaurs like
Yeah.
Stegosaurus and Triceratops being feathered. Myself, of course I see it on the theropod.
Right.
But I have a hard time imagining a feathered Stegosaurus.
I don't know if we take this feather stuff too far. Part of me says, if we found the first bird and we found that it had long wings and it could fly, we might immediately propose then that all relatives of this animal flies. And yet then we would discover ostriches and rheas and emus and cassowaries and penguins, and we would say, well, that didn't. So maybe this notion of feathers, we might be going overboard. But, they found this little Stegosaurus that clearly has feather-like quills on its tail, and he's an herbivore. And I did look at the skin of that Triceratops that the guys at Black Hills had. Those look like quill points, just like the quills of an ostrich. But whether everybody has them or not, I just don't know.
Maybe it's more hair-like.
Maybe so.
Now, that they did find one fully feathered Ornischian dinosaur from Rheas not that long ago, and even multiple feathered ornithomimid type dinosaurs, but those are the theropod lineage.
Yeah.
There's a really good video about which group of dinosaurs may or may not have been feathered that Trey the Explainer did on YouTube that I'll send you a link to after this is over. It provides a good summary of evidence for feathered dinosaurs versus non-feathered dinosaurs and non-theropod groups. I'll send you a link to after we're done. That get back to the question much better than I could.
One of the weirdest paleo things I've seen in recent years is the idea that Stegosaurus might have been aquatic. There was a reconstruction done by somebody, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they restored Stegosaurus as an aquatic dinosaur.
I had one time talked to Dr. Bacher about Ceratosaurus. And it's exactly what he said. He goes, this thing is designed to be in water. It's got a flexible tail, which is not a common trait in theropods. Most theropods' tails are held stiff by a series of little bony connecting rods that interconnect the vertebra and actually limit the flexibility of the tail. And he didn't have them. And then, so, now that we know that the evidence suggests that Spinosaurus is aquatic, not fully aquatic, but designed to be a pescivore, who knows how many other animals we might have misinterpreted as being terrestrial and only to find out that they're semi-aquatic. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe Ceratosaurus was a theropod trying to be Spinosaurus.
Yeah. Good point. That's a great point. You know, he's one of the few that had 4 fingers, and retaining that 4th finger would be beneficial if you're trying to catch fish. So who knows, you know?
Well, this is just my own personal opinion, but I think that there were fully aquatic species of dinosaurs that we've yet to discover. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility.
Oh, truly. Yeah, absolutely, Sam. You're right. It's certainly possible that there are fully aquatics, and, you know, who knows what the future. These guys are finding so much new stuff every day. I can't keep up with it.
There's a lot of interesting research about the questions of blood pressure going up the neck of a sauropod.
Yeah.
Of course, this is of interest to me because these same arguments may apply to elasmosaurs as well.
Sure. Yeah, the question is, what kind of blood pressure does it take to move the blood to the brain and back without blowing the head off of the sauropod? And so there's a couple of different ideas. One is a one-way gate valve system that lines the arteries going up to the neck where they don't have any backflow, so therefore it doesn't require the same amount of pressure. And then others are looking at giraffes. Giraffes has something to do with the patterns on their skin as kind of acting like almost a squeezing motion on the neck to keep the backflow of blood from coming down. And that's how giraffes do it. I don't know for certain. I don't remember all of the findings, but yeah, that'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to know. But I will say this, the majority of the paleontologists I know and talk to are all of the agreement that sauropods are not raising their heads up to those heights, but instead they're using them to move through the forest, cropping off everything within reach. The only thing I have to say about that would be the extension of the neck. Then the only benefit is you can reach a little further. But what difference does it make if you take one step, you've reached further? Why would the neck not be used to reach up and take advantage of the highest vegetation? That's the thing that confuses me.
Yeah, well, I've seen some reconstructions where the sauropods go up on their back legs and raise the front part of the body.
Right. Right.
Rather than raising it up in a swan position.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, boys, I'm going to have to bail on you guys. I'll leave you to continue, but I've got another call I have to take in about 10 minutes. So I've got to, this one is a big one too. So I'm going to have to bail on you guys. Any other questions for me or anything else from me?
I just want to say it's been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, Scott.
I gotta say, this interview came out 10 times better than our last interview did. No bugs, no glitches, no gremlins. Good questions, good discussion. This is how an interview should be done if we do it over Skype.
Thank you very much for your time, George. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Sam, I appreciate it. Scott, I had a great time. Christopher, it's good to see you and talk to you. And Greg, I've really enjoyed talking to you guys. Anytime in the future, if my time allows, would love to come back. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy talking to you guys, and I enjoy the subject matter too very much. I've enjoyed it a lot. So thank you guys very much for allowing me to be on. I appreciate it very much.
We much appreciate you coming on here with us, and you're well welcome to come back anytime. Or
Thanks,
even to
guys.
help us with other guests we might interview someday if you're up for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say of everything, though, it's Scott's image has been the highlight of the entire podcast. So you guys take care. It's been very difficult staying on subject, but by gosh, we did it. So boys, I enjoyed it very much.
Yes, that was a riot.
Take care, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Be sure to send us a file when you find a beta post.